Welcome to Breaking Down Mental Health with Dr. Jones. In these educational videos, Dr. Jones will discuss mental health diagnosis, clinical supervision, using technology in counseling, multiculturalism, and many other topics to help you get a healthy understanding of why mental health is important. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button if you enjoy these videos. In this video, we're looking at I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. In this video, we'll be covering Chapter 5 and Chapter 6, and also looking at the first interlude in the book, and looking at the thoughts on integration in the workplace. Once again, I want to remind you that this book is written by Austin Channing Brown, so I want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. And it's extremely important that you have read this book prior to watching this video so you can understand the context in which I am coming from. And so I want to take a few minutes to go through some key points I found in Chapter 5, Chapter 6, and also in the interlude to see how to connect that with counseling and also with the workplace of counselors. In Chapter 5 of the book, it talked about whiteness at work, where she shared with us some of the things she's experienced as an African-American female in the workplace. And one of the things that she talks about in Chapter 5 is talking about the topic of assimilation. That for many corporations and many companies, when they talk about their hiring practices, when they talk about diversity, equality, and inclusion, in their mind, they're thinking that the end goal is assimilation, that we all come together, we all think the same, and when we all think the same, then things can move forward in the right direction. The problem is that assimilation is not and should not be the goal. Because when we think about the process of assimilation, what we're doing with assimilation is that we're asking certain groups of people, which primarily ends up being people of color and people from minority groups, we're asking them to give up part of themselves to join what we'll call the white norm of the workplace. That the rules and standards that are set there, we need to give up part of ourselves in order to assimilate to be what they want us to be. And what that looks like is that you have individuals who give up a lot of themselves. And so when we see whiteness at work, as she puts it in this book, what happens is those people who don't belong to the white population, there's not really a lot of change that's asked of them. Most of the change is coming from those who are from the minority populations. And what it does, it helps to put those who are in the majority population at rest, and it helps them to feel at ease and helps them to feel more comfortable. So I have to give up part of myself. The person of color has to give up part of themselves in order for everyone else to feel comfortable. And although that may sound to some people as being a good thing, it's not helpful. Because once again, I have to give up part of me. And what makes that fair? What makes a situation where I must feel like I have to once again, not be my authentic self, but on top of that, I need to give up part of what's important to me in order to fit into a picture that you have painted for me. And the artist of that picture is someone who does not look like me, who does not sound like me. And this is a problem we're finding in the workplace. We're seeing this whether you're in the counseling field or in other fields, that you're asking minority groups to assimilate, lose yourself, leave part of yourself behind, and come do what makes me comfortable. And once you do that, we can get along in perfect harmony. The problem with that is it causes more stress and more strain on minority groups, because we once again can't be ourselves. We've given up part of who we are in order for this to happen. So assimilation, although it may sound good from the outside looking in, it's not a very effective thing, and it's not helpful for the workplace. It's also, if we're thinking about our clients, so we're working with them, if we want our relationship with them to be authentic, and we're asking them as well to assimilate, and we're asking them to give up who they are, we can't build a relationship with them. So the same thing can't happen with us as we're working in this field, as we're trying to help people to grow. Part of that growth has to happen in our relationships we have in the workplace. But in order for that to happen, we need a different model than assimilation. We need to be looking at something quite a bit different than assimilation. Another thing that she talks about in her book is that diversity is not proven by numbers. In my previous video, I talked a little bit about hiring more people of color to help to make sure there's more people to be a part of this process. So when people look at your company, they'll be able to see that you're being serious about this change. And so I still stand by that about having more people of color in your office spaces, in leadership, and in as to represent what's in the community. The problem is you can't just prove diversity by having a bunch of people there. You can have a company that has a white CEO and have all black employees, but if none of the employees have a voice, you're diverse, kind of, but they don't have a voice. And so the true diversity comes with inclusion and equity. That means that everyone has an equal spot at the table and everyone has an equal voice at the table. And so that's really how diversity is really going to be lived out, is by making sure everyone has a place. And so many corporations, and especially when we look at counseling in particular, they will spend time making sure they hire right, with the air quotes there, hire in the right way, to have those different looking faces for the website, to have different looking faces for the materials they publish. And when they have people come to visit about and talk about working there, they may have that one person, the token person who comes, and they're the ones who is the one encouraging people to come and join the work there. And that's great and all. But at the end of the day, if that person doesn't have a voice when you bring them in, the question then becomes, why did you bring that person in the first place? And so diversity has to be more than a numbers game. It has to be a transformational piece of the organization that you're a part of, that you're looking to see changes come about in the workplace, and not just from a visual perspective, but also a thought perspective. Has the thoughts and the missions and the goals of this organization change based on the people who are there, and are they getting a voice? And if they are getting a voice and they're getting an equal chance to speak and being a part of those decision-making processes, then we can say diversity and equity and inclusion has been reached. But if you're just having a bunch of different brown and faces at your office, or other minority populations at your office, that in and of itself does not change anything. And so we have to look at diversity differently. That was a specific quote from this chapter that I just really thought spoke volumes. It says, "Whiteness likes a trickle blackness, but only that which can be controlled." And this is just my interpretation of what Austin Brown is saying here. For me, when I see that, where it says whiteness likes a trickle blackness, but only that which control, is that most companies or most places of counseling related, whether you're talking about being trained as a counselor or the agencies that have people of color that work there, it's okay to have different voices. It's okay to have different people in different seats, but not too much. Because if there's too much of that, then there is a lack of control. Now, what happens in those situations is now the majority don't feel like their voices are now being heard, and they feel discriminated against. Imagine that. And so that's uncomfortable. That's something that I may have built, or something that I have been a long part of. I don't want to give up that power. I don't want individuals coming in and seeking different ways of doing things, because we've done things the same way for a long time. And so whiteness is, from this sense, likes to have some diversity, but only enough that can be controlled, because once that is not controlled, then changes happen that I am not prepared for. And so I think that quote is very powerful to look at. And as we look at the organizations that we are working for, or we are coworkers, or we're looking at our clients, are we seeking control? Are we trying to seek that things stay the way they always have been because that's what we're comfortable with? Or are we seeking new voices to come in and help us to see that we can do things differently? And that may be scary. It may not fit for what you, in your mind, for the direction you need to go. But when we start to hear different voices and we start to give up control of the way things go, then it's going to look different than the way we planned. It's going to be different from anything we thought before. So it's important for us to realize that this is important. This is a key thing that has to happen in organizations, especially in council organizations, is that we seek to give up that control and let other voices be heard. And that's going to change things significantly. Also, we see in this with this chapter here, talks about how understanding blackness takes work. In this chapter, she gave a picture of what her day looked like from the beginning of the day throughout the end of the day, and some of the things she had to go through in order to be able to survive at work for that single day. And it was amazing to see how many different situations she found herself in where she had to either change herself or she had to be worried about what other people thought just so she could be accepted in the workplace. Am I coming off too harsh? Are people thinking I'm that angry black woman? Things of that nature. All these are things that being black is really synonymous with. Making sure that making sure they're on time, and not at a regular thing, but even earlier than other people because they don't want any stereotypes to be stuck with her name. And so this chapter helped us to understand that blackness has to be understood. That in order to be able to embrace your coworkers or to embrace your clients or to embrace people that you work with as well about their culture, you need to take the time to understand what does that feel like to walk in that person's shoes. And that's not always easy. It's not always easy to accept and to hear what people's experiences are and not try to combat it with your own perspective. Because it's easy to say, well, things aren't that bad or things are getting better. People are really not wanting to hear that. People want you to hear their story and want you to understand this is where I'm coming from. These are the hoops that I have to jump through in order to be seen as a part of the team here. And the things that I may or may not like doing, but I have to do that just so that I can be accepted for the things I do. And so this understanding of blackness, and I think you can even fill that in with any other minority group, is something that takes work, that we have to make sure we're spending time understanding different populations of people that are working in our agencies, that are working with us. And we do that, and we do that work on the front end. We're going to be able to see how we can help alleviate some of that stress and strain that they're going through. Because if you really got an honest answer from many of the employees that you work with, or really got an honest answer from your coworkers that you walk in the hallway with, or really got an honest answer from some of the clients that you see, they may tell you how difficult it is being a minority or being part of a minority population and trying to fit in with the majority population, how much work that it takes, the stresses they go through. And it's not a pretty thing. It doesn't feel good. And there's not an easy way to do it. And so understanding what that looks like for some individuals, I think that's something that a lot of people should be working on, regardless of what population that is, so that you not only become informed, but you can also grow in your empathy. And hopefully with that empathy, change will come in the expectations that you have at work for individuals. In one of her first interludes in the book, she included a chapter called "Why I Love Being a Black Girl." One thing I feel like a lot of individuals don't always recognize is the role that Black women have served in and the role that Black women play in the lives of corporate America, in the counseling room, and just in society in general. And so I appreciated how she took some time in the book to talk about why she loved being a Black girl. What for her, what was beautiful about that. One thing I took from that was the fact that Black women have learned to survive. When we look at back at our history in the United States, many of the things that have happened in our country have happened because of black women. And they don't always get the credit for the things that they do. We just several years ago, the movie Hidden Figures came out, and so many people just flocked to that movie. And they really loved seeing that movie because there was finally something. It was a picture of black women being used in a proper way, and them being empowered to do these great things. But the reality of it is, although that movie is a good movie, and although the movie has a good it's a good feel good to end at the end of it, black women have been doing this type of work forever. They've always been the one who's been there to do what needs to be done, sometimes ignoring their own personal mental health, sometimes ignoring their own physical health, always making sure that their families can and will be taken care of because they know that the importance in that. And so black women have always learned to survive in any environment you put them in. That's one. I have so many great friends who are black women. Obviously, my mother is a black woman as well, and it's amazing to hear their stories and to hear the things they have gone through to be able to survive, not just in the workplace, but just to survive in life. And so I just don't think we spend enough time talking about the survival skills of black women and all that they have done for this country and what they've done in the workplace, and how the work that they do sometimes just goes unappreciated. It goes unnoticed, but yet the work still gets done and they do that. Also, the fact that black women live up to two different standards of beauty, and I think that's something important for us to talk about. When we think of beauty, when the media shows us beauty, we get a picture of, for lack of a better term, a Barbie doll figured person, and that is what our beauty standards are built off of. I will say we've come a long way with that. That we've somewhat in our country we have changed the way in what the perfect model of what beauty looks like. The problem still remains, though, is that image that we have is the image of a white woman. That is what the beauty standards are built upon. And so when, as a black woman, you see black women having to be compared to white women when it comes to what their beauty looks like. And so the statement that you are beautiful for a black woman is still saying, okay, you're beautiful, but not the same level. You're beautiful, but if you were white, maybe you look different. And so black women struggle through that standard of beauty from that perspective of being compared against white women. Another standard of beauty that black women have to stand up to is colorism, even amongst other black women. That if you have lighter skin tone, whether you have darker skin tone, colorism is a big deal that they have to deal with. And so we see that the black women continue to strive. They continue to do well, but they're still having to compare themselves to two standards of beauty. I know many of you remember the research that was done several years ago with children, with black children, and showing them dolls. And over again, the white doll was being chosen over the black doll because, once again, we have equated beauty with white. And I'm hoping at some point we change that and be able to help to understand that black women have gone through all this, and that their beauty is beauty because they are black women, and not having to give them any other standard to go by, that they have what is a standard of beauty all of their own. Also, the black women are also supportive. Not only have black women done just about everything there is to be done in our country, black women stand behind black men to support them in the things that they are doing. I don't know too many black men out there that has some type of support from a black woman at some point in their life who has supported them in their goals and things that they're trying to do. And once again, I think that's something that black women do not get enough credit for. And so when I have that client comes in who is a black woman, and knowing the struggles that she has been through, or if I have that coworker who's a black woman and knowing some of the struggles she may deal with, Well, I know I have a boss who's a black woman and knows some struggles she's deal with. There's someone that's in leadership. I think about the struggles they go through and the hoops they have to jump through just because, first of all, not only are they a woman, they're a black woman. So they're a double minority to begin with. And there's a lot of pressure they have to be up under. And so I think it's important. I'm glad she brought that out in this book that we need to be more mindful of how wonderful black women are and what they have done, what they've done, and what they continue to do, and how we will be lost without black women. In chapter 6, Austin Channing Brown brings up the topic of white fragility. This is a term that is often misunderstood, and for many people that hear this term, they're taken aback by it when they hear it for the first time. And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking a little bit about what this white fragility actually mean, and how do we deal with this when we talk about us as therapists working with clients, also whether as us working together as coworkers, and also when you're seeing this when it comes to dealing with management. So whenever we think about white fragility, there's three main points I want to make sure that we're talking about, and so I actually want to start with my last point first and kind of work backwards. That one of the things we see about white fragility is that expressions of white fragility cannot be controlled. That when we think about when folks feel guilty because of things that may have happened in the past or things that are happening currently that they are simply not doing anything about, there sets in a bout of guilt, and the fragility really comes into play when it comes to their ego and how they see themselves and how they think other people will see them. And so because of this causes a lot of transition in people's way they react and how they end up expressing themselves once that happens, because emotionally this person is now raw. This person doesn't really know how to deal with reality the way that it is, because they're now put in a position they never had to be in before. And so one of the things we first see happens with white fragility is that you see individuals become defensive. I didn't do that. I wasn't to blame with that. Whatever the case may be, but it becomes very, very personal. And when it becomes personal, some people don't know how to control their emotions during that time period. And that's where that term fragility comes from, is that having a hard time of just really holding themselves together when they're feeling guilt based on either something they did or that other white people did. Now, I think one thing is important for us to understand is that when we talk about white fragility, we are not saying that all white people are doing a certain thing, and so all white people are fragile. So I want to make sure that that is not the definition we're getting from this. Well, the definition I hope we're getting from this is that some white individuals, when faced with the realities that other people go through, they don't know how to respond to that, and their defensiveness keeps them from really seeing the viewpoint of anyone else. And that's what makes it hard to deal with white fragility, because they don't know how to deal with it, because once again, this is not something they've had to deal with before. No one's really challenged their viewpoint of life. Now it's being challenged. It's now also being threatened in some ways, they feel, and so they're not really sure how to deal with it. And so trying to control someone's emotion during this time period really is not possible. But it's important to realize that that is a truth that many people of color will see when someone is feeling fragile, especially someone in white in a situation. And what happens in a situation like this, it makes the feelings of whiteness the most important thing. So basically what is happening is, we'll just say, for instance, there's a shooting in the black community, and we'll say that shooting was at the hands of a police officer, for example. In order for me as a person of color to be able to mourn that, or for me to be able to bring those things up, or to feel like I can talk about those things in the workplace, or even with my counselor, or anything like that, or with my coworkers, I almost have to do a check-in to see if that is okay to bring up, because I have to be concerned about other people's feelings before I can even express mine. That sounds almost kind of toxic, doesn't it? And the reason why it sounds toxic is because it is toxic. Because me expressing my own feelings may make someone feel bad about themselves. And so people will feel guilty, once again, even though they may not have been involved with it, but they feel like they're being attacked because someone brings up something that may be factual. And so this causes a lot of confusion. And so the person of color or the person from that minority group, they really don't get opportunity to express what they're feeling unless they're getting permission to do that. But they also, first of all, have to check in to make sure with those who are white if this is okay. And that's what's problematic about this. It also ignores the personhood of people of color. Because when you basically don't have the ability to express your feelings, when you have to ask someone else it's okay for you to feel a certain way, when you have to check in to make sure this is a topic that can be brought up or talked about in the workplace or even with your clients, then basically you're not really seen as a person. You have gained some type of second class citizenry because your opinion really doesn't matter. Your thoughts don't really matter because what affects you, what happens to you, what affects you, doesn't really affect me because I haven't experienced that. And so in the book, she calls out some different situations where she saw individuals were dealing with white fragility and they weren't sure, they didn't deal with it well. And I think as clinicians, we have to be very mindful of clients who come in who are either people of color or those who are coming from these, once again, those minority populations, that they feel like they have the space to be able to talk about the things they're going on to. And if I'm a white clinician or a white coworker or whatever the case may be, they don't need my permission to be able to monitor things that are important to them. They don't need my permission to express what they're feeling. Because when we start requiring that, whether it's covert or overtly require that, then we're telling them that you really don't matter. You really don't get a say so in how you feel. And if you say something that makes me feel bad about myself, then that automatically makes it wrong. And I think that's where the problem really comes in, is because I'm feeling bad about myself or I'm feeling defensive, then that has to be wrong. And there's really not a good way of working around that. And so this is one of those things that I'm glad she brought up in the book. And I think the only way we truly ever get past this is that individuals who are white who feel this way, when they find themselves in this situation, they have to look beyond themselves. They have to look beyond their own personal feelings. They have to look beyond their own guilt that they're feeling for whatever reason that guilt is coming on. They have to look beyond all of that. And when they can truly see how situations in this world are affecting other people besides themselves, then maybe we can see some growth and change in this area. But this is not something that anyone else on the outside looking in can fix. You can't do enough trainings in the world to fix this. It takes an individual to recognize that, hey, I'm being fragile about this situation. I'm taking this too personal when this is not really about me. And I've got to listen to what other people's perspectives are. If someone can't be humble enough to do that, it really can't be taught to them to be able to do that. And so this is some personal work that individuals will have to do in order to get past this. Well, I hope this video has been helpful for you as we've kind of gone through chapter 5 and the interlude and also chapter 6 to see what she had to say about these topics. I want to hopefully join you again on the next videos. We'll continue to work through this book and look how we can integrate her thoughts and her perspectives into the counseling room, and also as we're working with the coworkers and with management, how we can work through these situations in a way that's going to bring a benefit to our clients, benefits to us as coworkers, and benefit to us as we try to work with management.